Hi, everyone, and welcome to our artist and album hangout today with composer Jack Gallagher. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing great, Amanda. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We're so delighted that you could join us to discuss your career, your new album, Symphony No. 2 and Quiet Reflections, and your overall musical life.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, Jack, you've written quite a bit of music over the years, most of which seems to fall into four categories: orchestral, chamber, piano, and choral works. And both of your symphonies have been recorded and released by Naxos. I suppose those four categories cover almost the complete sonic spectrum of classical music. Is that right?
Well, except for opera, and I haven't completely abandoned hope for that. Maybe still someday.
I was actually just going to ask you if you ever considered writing an opera.
I love opera. Do you have a good libretto?
No, I studied jazz voice.
I love jazz. I started as a jazz player.
Did you really?
I did indeed, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Can you tell me more about that?
I was a jazz trumpet player, very interested in bebop. Among my early heroes were Clifford Brown, Art Farmer, Donald Byrd, Lee Morgan, and certainly Freddie Hubbard.
Oh, wow. So do you find that those early influences have had an effect on your orchestral writing?
Without doubt, because I started writing at first by doing transcriptions of great solos that I admired. I would try to Clifford Brown solos by transcribing them, and then learn to play them back. And then I also started trying to do some charts, take arrangements off of records, and play them with friends in high school. And that's what got me into writing in the first place.
Right. How interesting. So I know you were born in Brooklyn and you spent your formative years growing up in different parts of New York City in the suburbs. Was New York the place to be for a composer?
Well, I don't know if any place is the place to be for a composer. Being a composer carries its own sets of burdens and challenges, I fear. But certainly New York is an extraordinarily happening place musically. And it's just wonderfully full of invigorating stimuli of all kinds. And I just found the sound of all the different kinds of music of every sort when I was growing up to be immensely exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So how old were you when you first started studying music?
Well, I didn't really begin study of an instrument until the third grade. And I began with a very unlikely instrument. A friend came into my public school class and showed off for the entire class are you ready for this, Amanda?
What?
His accordion.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
Wow!
You know the old Larson cartoon? Welcome to heaven, here's your harp. Welcome to hell, here's your accordion. Yeah. But I was very taken with his accordion. We did not have a piano in our household. So I went home immediately and asked my parents if I could study the accordion. And they began, bless their hearts, they began taking me for lessons when I was in the third grade.
Wow, that is such a unique
Isn't that odd?
to start on. Yeah.
Then in the fifth grade, I became eligible to take music in the public schools, and I had become very much interested in the trumpet because of a set of discs that my parents got me when I was very young that featured a trumpet solo. Right. So I decided that's the instrument I want to play, and gradually trumpet overtook the accordion in my affections, although I know that's hard to imagine.
Yeah. So as a trumpet player, you studied with Charlie Gauss,
yes.
Gauss, yeah, and Alan Dean. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Well, they were both wonderful players and musicians. Alan Dean, bless his heart, is still teaching in his mid-70s now. He's the main trumpet teacher at Yale University.
Oh, wow.
But when I studied with him, it was on Long Island, and he was one of the top New York freelancers at that point. Charlie Gauss was my undergraduate trumpet teacher, and he was enormously helpful. He was a wonderful mentor, very inspiring, extraordinarily patient with me, and I owe both of them a great deal.
Wow. So you graduated from Hofstra University and went on to get your Master of Fine Arts and Doctor of Musical Arts from Cornell. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. Yep. So how would you compare your formal college and your post-college training compared with your private instruction that you received growing up?
Well, when one starts out learning an instrument, one, of course, learns just mechanics, how to read music, how to count, rhythms, all of that. And as you get further and further along the pipeline, then things start becoming a little bit more nuanced and complicated and subtle and what have you. So for me, the important differences were that I started becoming really interested not just in being able to recreate music, not that that's in any way anything lesser than creating it, but I found that there was a whole different aspect available to recreating music by trying to either learn how to play jazz or create arrangements or write one's own music. So in that sense, I would say that my emphasis shifted.
Right. So so composing kind of became more of a focus then?
Little by little, it did. Yes, I was still very serious about trumpet playing, but I really loved listening to lots of great music. After I'd I listened to lots and lots of jazz, but after I got to college, I started listening to lots and lots of concert music too.
Yeah.
And the sound of the orchestra always seemed very intoxicating to me, and still does.
Yeah.
So because of that, I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. And the more I listened, the more I felt like, boy, it would be wonderful somehow if one could make sounds like this oneself.
Right.
And I began my early experiments, and I was very fortunate that at Hofstra University, there was a wonderful American composer whose name was Elie Siegmeister.
Mm.
And he was a terrific composer, and I began studying with him, and he really helped a lot to introduce me to what it meant to make music from a serious and professional standpoint.
Right. And I see, in addition to Elie, you also studied with Robert Palmer and Beryl Phillips.
Yes.
Were they at Cornell as well?
They were both at Cornell. Robert Palmer was the main teacher at Cornell. He was not the same Robert Palmer, of course, that you may know from the rockers in the,
right.
the rocker in the 70s and 80s. But on the other hand, he was a wonderful teacher. He was at Cornell for about, I think, 35 years or so. And he's credited with really having founded the first program, the doctoral program in composition at Cornell. It's supposed to be the first doctoral program, it's thought, in our country and maybe even anywhere. So he had a lot of wonderful composers under his tutelage. And he was very kind to take me into his program, largely on the recommendation of my studies with Elie Siegmeister. Mm. He and Elie Siegmeister were friendly. Beryl Phillips was a wonderful composer who taught for many years at University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. And he had retired recently. And when my teacher, Robert Palmer, during my second year of graduate study at Cornell, went on a year's leave, he secured Beryl Phillips to be his one-year replacement. And Beryl Phillips was, again, a wonderful, magnanimous, terrific, warm-hearted, very encouraging and benevolent person. So I was very lucky.
Yeah, it sounds like you were very lucky. Can you tell me some of the differences you experienced learning music at a college level versus post-college level?
Well, when I was an undergraduate, I was mostly leaning towards, at first, music education. I took one music education course, actually it was a general education course, and decided this was not for me.
Yeah.
I liked the doing of the music more than the idea of teaching the music. Now, this is kind of ironic because I taught public school music for 2 years after I graduated college, and then I've been teaching at the College of Worcester for 37 years now.
Yeah.
So if I say that it didn't seem for me, what I meant was on the, I guess what seemed to me on the most basal public school level didn't quite seem like it was my cup of tea. And therefore I became much more interested in performing. And I therefore concentrated my energies mostly on trying to become as good a trumpet performer as I could. And since it was in the New York City area, there were lots of opportunities, so it was a wonderful experience. By the time of graduate school, though, I had shifted my emphasis a great deal and then was interested in learning as much about composing as I could. So I kind of packed the trumpet away and started working very hard on the piano. The piano became a little bit more accessible to me because of the accordion experience that had been my background.
Right.
So it helped pick up on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so you studied piano with Lawrence Schubert, Malcolm Bilson, and Noel Lee, is that right?
Noel Lee, right. Malcolm Bilson taught for many, many years at Cornell and is a tremendous player of the pianoforte or forte piano. Has done many historical recordings of the complete Mozart concertos and other repertoire.
Yeah.
So, and Lawrence Schubert was a brilliant player who taught me a great deal about jazz and concert music. So I feel lucky with all of those people.
Yeah, you had a very well-rounded group helping you out there. So your pieces have been performed or recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra, Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, Virginia Symphony Orchestra. The list goes on and on and on. Am I correct that you have 18 of your pieces recorded by labels such as Naxos, Musical Heritage Society, Vienna Modern Masters, Summit Records, and many others? Can you tell me about that experience?
Well, there are 18 of them. Two of the three most recent ones are the orchestral discs with London Symphony on Naxos. And because those are devoted entirely to my own music, I think of those with the most fondness. They were all important to me, and I'm very honored and delighted that they're all out there. But many of the earlier ones were where I had one piece on a collection of other pieces. And it's a greater opportunity, I think, when one has an entire disc devoted to one's own music. So I feel very fortunate that Joanne Follette and the London Symphony Orchestra were able to do those two discs of my music.
Yeah, absolutely. So we here at Crossover Media have had the great pleasure of working to obtain airplay for your symphony recordings. And you're heard on radio stations all over the US and Canada and Europe. Can you tell me about your Symphony No. 2 recording that we worked?
Well, first of all, having all that airplay is a great privilege and honor.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to Crossover Media for helping make it possible.
Oh, we're grateful to you for making wonderful music.
Well, thank you. Having Symphony No. 2 recorded was a large enterprise. The piece is about 63 minutes long, which is a fairly long symphony. And it took me, with my regular teaching at the College of Worcester, it took me 3.5 years to compose, edit, and complete it and get it all ready to go for recording.
Wow.
So it was a long time coming, but I decided that after many years of being in the business of being in music education, where I've conducted and performed in, as well as written for many college-level ensembles, that was a very wonderful experience, which has helped me enormously, and which grew out of my early writing of jazz arrangements and charts for people, friends and acquaintances who were around. So in that sense, it was a natural connection, and I loved it. But on the other hand, college students, for the most part, are not going to be on the same level as the most distinguished professionals are.
Sure.
And I decided at one point, I decided that as grateful as I am to have had all of these wonderful performance opportunities with college-level ensembles, wouldn't it be nice to really be able to write something and not have to worry about technical constraints at all?
Yeah.
And I knew that with an orchestra such as the London Symphony, that would not be an issue. So I tried to give myself permission to write a much longer piece and a more complicated and demanding one technically. And I'm so glad I had this opportunity, because they are wonderful. They can play anything. And it was just a great honor to be able to do that.
Can you tell me a bit about your composition process? Do you compose all your music on the piano, or do you sometimes get in touch with people who play instrument, the instrument that you want to write for, to determine the range and everything?
Well, those are good questions. Normally I start on the piano, and I usually start with a notebook sketchbook, and I make lots and lots of sketches and try to think about what the character of the piece is I'm going to try to be pursuing, and what kind of music might be, in the most generic sense, might be suitable in terms of tempo and mood and what have you for that character. And then I hope that after writing lots and lots of scraps, many of which get jettisoned, mercifully, but after writing lots of scraps, I hope that I can start seeing some continuity possible in there, and then begin putting it together. Does that make any sense? Yeah,
no, it does. So let's move on to some of your symphony recordings that we've had the pleasure of working on. First, orchestral music. That disc was awarded five-star reviews by BBC Music Magazine. Can you tell us a bit about that piece and how you came up with the ideas to write it, musical or otherwise?
Well, again, it was a great honor to have that piece be awarded 5 stars by BBC Music Magazine. And I feel very grateful to have been in that position. The 4 pieces that are on that disc are all pieces that I had the great pleasure of conducting with the Wooster Symphony Orchestra, which is the college orchestra where I teach. One of them, actually, the earliest of the pieces was the Berceuse. It's only 5 minutes long, although it's been maybe arguably the most broadcast of the pieces that I have so far. I think probably because it's fairly easy to take, and it's short, and that maybe makes it a little bit more easy to program and air. But that piece was actually composed for the community orchestra that was run by my former trumpet and conducting teacher, Charles Gallagher, whom we spoke of earlier. So he gave the first performance of that. Then when I came to the College of Worcester, I was able to conduct it here, and little by little, as I got to know the orchestra, I thought that it would be very good for me, and I hope not terrible for them also, if I were able to write some pieces I would try to tailor to their capabilities. So each of the pieces on the orchestral music disc has in fact been performed by me conducting the College of Worcester Symphony Orchestra. I also ought to give a shout out to our conductor here of the Wooster Symphony, whose name is Jeffrey Lindbergh, who's been wonderful about doing new music. He's done a lot of my music and a lot of the music of my students. That's been invaluable help. Yeah,
it's wonderful to have that support there.
It's been great.
Yeah. Do you find yourself coming into contact or working with some former teachers or former students or people that you've worked with in college, like now in your composing state?
It happens a fair amount, and it's always joy when that happens. Because oftentimes it's not a side of me that they had occasion to see very much of.
Right.
And it's sort of nice. It feels to me like it's sort of rounding things out a little bit when that can occur. So I'm always very pleased when that can happen.
It's wonderful. So for your current recording, Symphony No. 2, Ascendant and Quiet Reflections, recorded for Naxos by the London Symphony Orchestra, it was led by conductor Joanne Follette. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. What was it like working with such a marvelous conductor?
Well, Joanne is absolutely a dream. I can't say enough that's wonderful about Joanne Follette.
Yeah.
She's a brilliant professional. She's incredibly well prepared. She knows everything that she wants to get out of the orchestra and more, and is extraordinarily efficient, and also has the incredible virtue of being one of the most good-hearted people you'll ever run into in your life.
Yeah.
So it's the whole package, and I just feel very honored and glad that came about. And I owe that connection with Joanne Follette to my former producer, Michael Fine, who produced the orchestral music disc.
Yeah.
Michael suggested Joanne for the disc because he had worked with her on some other discs. And boy, that turned out to be just a golden suggestion. So I'm very grateful to him for that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So like you said, you're the professor of music at the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. And you also served as the music director of the Wooster Symphony in 1985 to 1986. Is that right?
Yes.
What was that like?
Sounds ancient now. Well, I played principal trumpet in the Wooster Symphony for many, many years. And then when the conductor who had been doing it resigned to take another position, then the orchestra found itself without a conductor, and I decided that I would step onto the breach for a while and do that. And having had some conducting instruction with my teacher, Charles Gauss, and having done lots of analysis, I found it was fascinating to be able to get in there and program a whole year's worth of music.
Yeah.
And be able to conduct. So I tried to make it a point of honor, at least for me it was a point of honor, for every subscription concert that year that I was the music director, I programmed 2 pieces of what were then 20th century music. Now we're in the 21st century, but the 20th century music pieces always included at least 1 piece by a living composer and 1 piece by an earlier 20th century composer. And that was my manifesto that more recent music deserves to be very much taken as seriously and given as much importance and attention as older music, even though the older music is very great and venerable.
Yeah. Actually, on a related note, how do you think that the world of classical music is changing in terms of, new composers and radio playing, new music and old music? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm astonished, actually, that the radio exposure, for example, for this new disc has been as great as it has been. Again, I'm deeply grateful to Crossover Music for making that possible. But I had long thought that perhaps most of the regular daytime station classical radio broadcasters would be more interested only in what I sometimes refer to as music by old dead white European guys. And I fit most of those categories, but I hope I'm not dead yet anyway. And to my great surprise and pleasure, there's been much more interest in the disc than I had thought. So I see things as actually being more promising than they had been, at least in my perception 30 years ago, when the whole concept of new music was kind of a dirty word and people avoided it, or so it seemed to me, like the plague. And this is, of course, as a jazz singer, this is very much the opposite. If you're a jazz person, people are really interested in what's new and what's going on and what's coming up. When I would write an arrangement for jazz players, it would always be like, "Hey, Jack wrote a new chart for us. Let's try it out."
Yeah, it's different in the classical
If you spend 3.5 years writing a symphony and killing yourself and doing the best you can, people say, let's play Beethoven.
Yeah.
So it's a very different complexion, I think, that's involved.
Yeah. How do you like living in Worcester? Do you find that living there has allowed you to new music to come about more readily as well, like compared to when you lived in New York?
In a sense, it has. I know that seems counterintuitive, but it has in the sense that because I'm on the faculty here and because I know the groups that I'm writing for, I feel able to tailor my music for them, and they, bless their hearts, have been eager to produce, in some cases, performances of music by somebody who's on the faculty. So I feel it has been really to our mutual benefit to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas in New York, it's very hard to get hearings sometimes because there's so much going on. Having said all of that, the college has been just a wonderful environment for meeting exciting young students who are very, very talented and very, very smart and very interested in what's going on in new music. And I find that enormously stimulating.
Yeah.
So in all of those respects, it's been a great honor to be aboard here for these many years.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in the perfect environment to nurture new music.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Jack, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thrilled that you were able to come on this Google Hangout with us.
Amanda, can I ask you one follow-up question?
Absolutely.
But you're a jazz singer.
Yes.
Who are some of your favorite models?
Oh my gosh, you're turning the tables on me. Well, for singers, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Nina. I am actually very, even though I'm a singer, I listen to a lot more instrumental music, especially since I went to school. Bill Evans is my love.
Bill Evans is fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm studying him a lot in college, and so I just adore him.
Do you play piano too?
Not as well as I like to.
Bill Evans' voice sings and tunes, and he's just wonderful.
Yeah, I did my senior recital in college. It was like a Bill Evans program.
Did you sing Waltz for Debbie?
Yes. Waltz for Debbie.
What a great tune.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful.
And you remember on the same Village Vanguard LP, do you remember he does My Foolish Heart?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that song.
That just breaks my heart. It's so poignant.
Yeah, and I did do you know the Two Lonely People?
Yes, of course.
Oh God, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Oh, Bill Evans is one of the great ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, well, sorry to turn the tables on you, but
no. I appreciate it. It's so nice of you.
Thanks again to Jack Gallagher for joining us for a Google Hangout. As always, feel free to watch this Hangout and many others on our YouTube page at crossovermedia.net. You can also check out our website, crossovermedia.net, for more on our artists and music news. You can also access our Facebook and Twitter pages in the upper right-hand corner. Our Twitter handle is _crossovermedia. Thanks again.